Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Student Impact Report brought to you by the Student Basic Needs Coalition. I'm Taylor Allgood, joining you from Washington, D.C., and I'm joined today by Owen Tanner Flomberg, co-founder and co-executive director of SBNC. So this is our seventh episode of the season. So if you haven't done so already, you can check out episodes 1 through 6 on our YouTube and Spotify pages, linked in our Instagram link tree at SBNC_USA. All right, let's get into it. How are you doing today, Owen?
I'm doing well. I'm surviving Chicago winter, trying to stay warm. It's like the coldest winter we've had in nearly like 40 something years, or the most snow, I think. Uh,
Yeah,
so just trying to stay inside, look at the snow. It's pretty outside, but definitely still adjusting to these Chicago winters.
yeah, I definitely don't envy you at the moment because I saw like a snow day notification come through from Cincinnati too. And I was like, whew, no snow here, thankfully. I'm not a big snow person, but I do
Oh
like
no.
the holiday season.
Yeah, no, I'm like it's a little early. I'm sure we're going to get lots more as we get into actual winter. As the weather guy said yesterday, it's not even winter yet technically, and we're already getting this much. But I'm really excited to talk today about what we've got in store.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. I know our story today covers a conversation that we've really had before recently, I think in a recent episode about the value of higher education and how it's being perceived. We talked about this in relation to choosing your college major and how that can factor into postgraduate income and success. So while public confidence in higher ed remains pretty low. Recent polls show that about 70% of Americans think colleges are going, quote, in the wrong direction. A new report from the American Association of Colleges and Universities tells us a different story from the side of employers. So, according to the survey, 85% of employers believe colleges are adequately preparing students for the workforce, and they place a high value on things like civic engagement, constructive disagreement, and learning in diverse environments, which I know is currently at the heart of many recent federal actions when it comes to higher ed. So, my first question for you, just diving into this a little bit, is why do you think there's such a stark gap between public skepticism and perception about higher education and employer confidence in college graduates?
Yeah, and I was somewhat surprised to see these numbers that were published as part of this research here, um, but actually not that surprised. And I think there's a lot of things at play here, as many of the stuff that we talk about on this show related to higher education. Um, Higher education is very connected to society at large, the economy at large, politics at large. And it makes sense that with all the instability and chaos and really squeeze that people are feeling around affordability, that we would, I think, see more Americans, I think, than ever before, be skeptical about the value of higher education. I think you could talk a lot about the politics and the perception that Americans have of higher education being maybe too liberal or too conservative, or pick your perspective there. But I really think you can boil this all down to economics and money. And what we've seen over the past several decades is, and really especially accelerated after the Great Recession, is a real acceleration of disinvestment in higher education by many states. And what that has looked like is, and what the real cost of that has been, is it shifted the cost of higher education more and more to the student themselves. And as education has gotten more expensive, more and more of those expenses keep getting, passed off to the student to then, get student loans essentially, or, sometimes get need or merit based assistance. But I think from like, and just even talking to my family and folks back home and where I'm from in Tennessee, I think people really are skeptical about higher education because of that price tag. It is so expensive. And I think it's really hard to espouse or promote the other values of higher education, like civic engagement, on how to communicate with people and debate, and some of those like for lack of a better term, higher brow utility that higher education has. That doesn't fully matter, I think, to most people on the ground, especially lower income folks, because it's not translating directly into a paycheck. And I think there's a real promise, and really the way that some of these things with the big beautiful bill is there's going to be like almost like a warning that when students are filling out their FAFSA and sending it to schools, if they're applying to certain programs that have a certain like what has been now or is being defined by the federal government as like a less economically valuable degree, they'll be getting a warning. And I think that's further putting like a cost in, cost out value perception on higher education, where I don't think you can really quantify higher education in fully just in the dollars and cents of how much it costs. So I think it makes a lot of sense, circling back, why a lot of Americans aren't trusting higher education, don't see it as a good value, but employers still see it as a good value because ultimately nothing's changed on their end. They are still, requiring degrees for degree required roles, and they still need folks with those degrees to fill those roles for various purposes.
Yeah, I know, like in the article I'm referencing for these questions, which is published by Inside Higher Ed, the article mentions how the 70% of Americans who said that they think higher ed is going in the wrong direction cited high costs, poor preparation for the job market, and lackluster development of students' critical thinking and problem solving skills. So that kind of, to me, points to what you're talking about in terms of, the general public not knowing if they're going to receive a good return on investment for how expensive higher education can be. And I wonder how much further that will be impacted by actions such as, the federal government divesting from higher education. I don't necessarily think that's going to help the case in any regard with improving some of those other things like workforce development and other training and skills that you develop while in college. Um,
Yeah, and like we're not even scratching the surface of like what the impact of like these new restrictions on student loans are going to be on people's perception of higher education. Like we could do a whole episode just on that. But there's a lot of changes coming around the pike that I think are just going to make these problems worse. And again, I think you can look at this 70% of people, not trusting or seeing the value in higher education. We've seen a decrease in trust in a similar way with every American or most American institutions, whether it's higher education, different branches of the government, etc. So not too surprising, but still very, very alarming.
so the report also shows that employers prefer graduates from institutions that respect diverse perspectives and aren't subject to government restrictions on curriculum or speech, even as we're seeing more political interference in higher ed. And I found this to be surprising because they also break it down by, I guess, political affiliation as well. And it seems to be bipartisan agreement that these employers are, wanting graduates from these types of institutions. So, what do you make of that tension between what employers say they want and what some of these policymakers in the federal government are currently pushing for?
Yeah, so what I would make of that tension is with many of the policies that this administration is promoting and pushing, that's not popular. And we've seen that in lots of contexts inside and outside of higher education. So I think that describes a lot. Like, I don't think that there was a big public mandate by the American people in the last election to reshape higher education the way that it's currently being reshaped. And I think, in a broad sense, especially, from an employer perspective, where they're thinking about training a lot and what the quality of candidates are for open positions at their organizations or their firms, it makes sense that they want to prioritize diverse perspectives, well-rounded education, because that's makes a more valuable employee in this era, especially with all of the technological changes underway right now with the rise of AI and the integration and the continued integration of AI we're going to see in various different work settings, I think, over the next few years as it's become more standardized and a lot safer to use. But I think, well-rounded employees make better employees. I know there's research out there that well-rounded education makes a better worker, a more creative worker, a worker that's better able to encounter novel challenges and overcome them. So it makes sense that employers are still looking for these folks, even if some institutions of higher education are feeling pressure or have been pressured to roll back some of the education training and programs that they provide to their students that help them get there.
Yeah, the federal government or whoever can, put pressure on these universities to not fully embrace DEI and these concepts as much as before, but that doesn't mean DEI or diversity of students and groups and of thought are going away by any means. And so I think it's more realistic for employers to realize that and to say, hey, that's still a valuable part of joining the workforce is learning how to work across differences and uh, you know, be collaborative with people who are going to be in your organization because you're not going to be completely uniform with anybody that you work with. And so it's important that they're still maintaining that sense of priority when it comes to wanting to hire a diverse workforce. But for my last question for you is, for students, as we were talking about in a previous episode, for students who might be anxious about choosing a major, finding a job, or even justifying the cost of college, what do you think this research should signal or, tell them?
Yeah. And, like I've said in previous episodes, I'm not a life counselor or career coach or financial advisor, but like my thought on reading, these statistics and this article here and this research is clearly employers still care. And clearly employers are still looking for folks that have received a higher education, have gotten that degree, and are looking for the knowledge, skills, and I guess ability to problem solve that degree holders are supposed to or are thought to possess. So we're still seeing a lot of strength from employers on demanding that their workforce does have higher education in certain settings. As for like the statistic around 70% of Americans not trusting the institution of higher education, I wouldn't read too much into that when students are making the decision whether or not to attend higher education, because that's like I think there's a lot more wrapped up in that figure and that number and that percentage of Americans that aren't trusting higher education. There's a lot more wrapped up in there. But at the end of the day, if a student's goal, which it should be, is if they go to school, they're able to leave school with a career that they can make a good living off of, to pay off any student loans they got, and also have a good, comfortable life. Higher education is still the pathway for many, many folks, if not most. Yes, that there are other career paths, obviously, that don't require higher education. Um, but I think higher education is still really, really important. And I think what employers are saying is a great indicator of that importance. I think the biggest advice, or one big point of advice that I would give for folks, whether they're in school or prospective students, is really pay attention to what's going on with the student loan situation and how different career paths or different degree programs can affect your eligibility now for or you might be not as eligible for as much student loans as you typically would have been eligible for. I know personally, like for my law school, I took out a ton of student loans. It was very expensive to go to law school, and I'm paying those off. But uh, one of the changes to the loans program is it's capping how much law students can actually obtain through student loans to finance their federally subsidized student loans to actually attend school and get through it. And like looking at the numbers, I would have had to have gone outside of the subsidized student loan market to get the funding that I would need to actually attend law school. So I'm coming from a very specific perspective here, but I think we're seeing changes on the way that nursing degrees and other graduate degrees are being treated, as well as undergraduate degrees are being treated. And I think being very cognizant and having a plan and making sure you're talking to your advisor on your campus to make sure that there's no confusion is really, really important now more than ever, given like all the instability and all the confusion around education financing right now. So I think that's the advice I would give, is just make sure you know what you're walking into. But I still strongly believe that there's a lot of value in higher education. I'm obviously biased to a degree, but yeah, I think really, really try to understand. Don't just trust that everyone's going to give you the right answer. I think with some of these things too, really do your research yourself.
Yeah, that's a great note to leave off on. I also, as a professional student, I would call myself, do also, believe that there is still hope and high value in higher education, should someone choose that as their path. So I definitely agree with everything you say in terms of just knowing what you're getting yourself into, staying alert, staying prepared through research, and also, diving deeper into maybe what type of scholarships and other financial aid, your college or university of interest may be able to offer as well to offset some of that. I know a lot of that cost and a lot of funding might be put now on the universities to provide for their students, if they have that capacity. But yeah, that is all the questions I had for you for today. Thanks for providing your input. It's always nice to just, talk about different issues impacting students in higher ed. And I think I got some nice insights from this conversation. So thanks.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on, Taylor.
Well, next up, I'll be speaking with Callie Goodman from the University of Wisconsin-Madison about her work as executive director with Slow Food UW. We'll talk about what it looks like to run a student-led organization focused on affordable, sustainable meals and how food justice, community, and leadership show up in her day-to-day work. Stay tuned. Callie Goodman is a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and an executive director for Slow Food UW, where she has been involved for the past 4 years. Slow Food is an international organization focused on creating a food system that is good, clean, and fair. And Slow Food UW serves the Madison, Wisconsin community. The organization is entirely composed of and led by UW-Madison students, which is amazing, where they serve weekly meals on Mondays and Wednesdays that are affordable, sustainable, and nutritious. Callie is passionate about the food system, especially understanding how food sits at the root of social justice, politics, community, and more. And she hopes to work in sustainability and agriculture in the future. Welcome, Callie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So let's dive into some questions. I'm really excited to learn more about you and your background. I think I resonate a lot with your bio, as you know, I'm also someone who's very passionate about food systems and how that intersects with ideas of community and more. But
hmm
you've been involved in Slow Food UW for 4 years now and serve as an executive director. So, can you first share a little bit more about how Slow Food works and then walk us through kind of what your day to day looks like in that role?
Yeah, totally. I think to start with Slow Food, you kind of have to talk about how it began. Slow Food is actually an international organization before it's just an organization on campus. But interestingly, it started back in 1986 in Italy. There was a fast food restaurant that was trying to be put in near the Spanish Steps in Rome. And basically, that kind of sparked some protests with some local activists, just kind of thinking about local food systems and keeping food local and close to home and how fast food might impact that. But basically, after that, it turned into a huge international movement that's been going strong since 1986. And it does a ton of different things. It works with farmers, it works with chefs, it works with communities. But basically, just looking at how we can make a more good, clean, and fair food system. And so, kind of coming to Slow Food UW, that was implemented, it began back in 2007, so almost 20 years ago, by a grad student here named Jenya Erling. And it kind of started as how we can connect local Wisconsin farmers with the Madison and especially the university community. And since then, it kind of grew into what it is today. So basically, we are trying to emulate a more sustainable food system and kind of touch on a lot of different things. So basically, what we do is the biggest function we have in the community is we serve Monday and Wednesday meals. So these meals are supposed to be affordable, sustainable, nutritious. Have different cultural cuisines that we feature, but we are a nonprofit and entirely student led, all volunteer, works off volunteering efforts. And we were just recently officially affiliated with the UW Madison University. So that's kind of what it is. But my role, yeah, I started 4 years ago when I was a freshman. There was someone from Slow Food came to my class and kind of talked about, this is what we do. We're here on campus, and I was really interested, so I showed up to volunteer quite soon after that, and basically I became a volunteer, and the next year I was an intern. The year after that, my junior year, I was a director for the cafe Wednesday meals, and this year now I'm one of the three executive directors. But basically, my role, I make sure that all our branches are running smoothly. So we have a communications branch, finance, we have sourcing, as well as a South Madison branch that does it's affiliated with the class on campus, and then we have our FDN family dinner night meal and then our cafe meal. So making sure the communication between those branches goes well, and also we often reach out to other organizations on campus and around Madison. So my role has a lot to do with collaborations with other organizations and kind of thinking about our mission as a whole and how we can have just the biggest impact that we can.
I really love how you shared kind of like more of the backstory behind it because I had never heard of it before being introduced to you. And so I just love that idea of bringing in different stakeholders and different people in the community to really keep that local element to the food system. And just a follow-up question to that, like, when you describe how it works, like meals on Monday and Wednesdays, is this more of like a restaurant type of setup? Like, how do students come in? Is it more like set up like a soup kitchen where, people will come in, grab the serving of the meal of the day, and eat that? Is there a cost associated? Just some of those questions.
Yeah, totally. So basically, I would say it's kind of both and neither at the same time. We do charge for our meals, but we try to do so in a way that's affordable. So typically, a full plate of food, which usually includes a main, a side, a dessert, and a drink, is usually around $6. And we're actually trying to lower that for next year just to make it even more accessible. But yeah, so the Monday meals are dinner time, so 6:30, and then the lunches on Wednesdays are at noon. So we typically have a line out the door, and people kind of come and line up, and they grab their meal. And these meals, we we kind of follow the entire process of these meals. So even from beginning to plan, we look at what collaborations can we do with orgs on campus. On Monday, no, on Wednesday, we have one with the Japanese Student Association. So they would help kind of plan the meals. Otherwise, we just try to get other recipes that maybe the interns have from home. But definitely trying to have a huge variety of different types of cuisines that we feature. And then in the sourcing aspect, we try to source locally and as sustainably as possible. So Madison has one of the best farmers markets in the country. So when that's running, we definitely go source from farmers. And then we also source from the Willie Street Co-op that's here in Madison. So they have a lot of local produce and a lot of local just food in general. So we put our money where we can with trying to source. It has gotten more difficult just with rising food costs, but I think we've done a good job of trying to keep it as sustainably sourced as possible. And then yeah, people come in. I think that's my favorite part is being able to you cook right there. It's the kitchen connected to the dining space, so everyone kind of sits at these long tables. A lot of chatter. We play different types of music. It's just really fun time. We get to interact with just a bunch of students in Madison community. And then at the end, we compost our meals too, or we compost our any food waste that we have, or we collaborate with food recovery networks so they can come in and grab our food and distribute it too. So that's kind of the way it works. But we're trying to make meals a little more affordable if we can next year too. So yeah.
That's incredible. And I love how like thoughtful you all are at every stage. Like you said, from planning to sourcing to even what you do with the food after. And just knowing that that's all run by students too is just super incredible and inspiring. Um, and even the cost that you mentioned too, like $6, I was like, wow, because meals nowadays, even when you go out to eat, I feel like meals for one person can be like $20+
Yeah.
now. So just the way that you're all able to keep those meals accessible and affordable, I think is truly incredible. But you personally, you said that you're especially interested in the intersection of how food sits at the root of social justice and politics and community. And so I'm curious to learn and hear more about what experiences at Slow Food UW have really shaped or deepened that understanding for you so far.
Yeah. Um, I think I'm an environmental studies major, along with food systems minor, but I only started out with my environmental studies major in school, and through all the classes I took and kind of just my experience with the climate crisis in general was it kept coming back to food and it kept coming back to agriculture, and I think I didn't realize I thought global warming and the climate crisis was like too much fossil fuel usage and stuff like that, which obviously that is a huge thing. But so much comes from food waste, so as well as just the way our agriculture system works and how fast it's changed in the past few years. Like, I think it's something that people don't think about a lot when it comes to the climate crisis. And then taking it a step further, it is so deeply connected to human rights. I think I believe that food is a human right, and but it isn't always treated that way in our society. And I think it's so important that first people are fed, and first that is treated as a human right, and then we can continue to address the climate issues. But I think, yeah, in my classes, I realized that, but also through just experiencing slow food and kind of how it brings together that sustainability, but also communal aspect together. I really thought that was something cool that that focuses on both at the same time. Um, but I'm trying to think of what else.
No, that was great. Yeah, I just wanted to really just understand kind of more about your motivations for
Mm,
wanting to study and understand
mm,
like the intersection of politics and
yeah.
food security and justice. And I think yeah, I think you answered that really well. Um, and as a student-led organization, serving the broader Madison community, I'm really fascinated by this piece that it's student driven. And I'm curious to know kind of in that experience of it being student driven, what are some of the biggest challenges and even rewards of, doing this work as students and keeping, slow food
Mhm.
affordable and sustainable?
Yeah. I think that's definitely one of the coolest parts is that it's student driven. So you kind of quickly when I joined Slow Food, I understood that what I say and do in this organization can have a big impact pretty quickly. Um, it changes, leadership changes every year, every semester. So it's definitely a growing organization and it can grow quickly with campus needs and um, thoughts and ideas that are going around on campus. But it definitely is a huge effort. We have about 50 interns within all of our branches. So there's a lot of work that gets done. These interns commit 4 hours a week, and it's all volunteer time along with the directors. So it definitely is a big effort. It's almost like a part-time job, is what a lot of people call it. But to me, what's always been so cool is just how willing people are to show up every week, and it's not glamorous work. You're washing dishes a lot of the time, you're figuring out budgets, you're trying to, cook, and maybe some people haven't cooked as much before, so it's definitely not always the most pretty work, but I think what brings people back is how, rewarding it is. I think what we talk about a lot is how being able to feed someone and being able to cook and share a meal with someone is one of the most human things that you can do. And I think that slow food is a place that you can really experience that, and you can just feel when you're there that people are first. I think what really brings people back to slow food, not even just as interns and directors, but as customers too, is the community we kind of allow. Like I said, our dining space has long tables that everyone kind of sits at, and you get to mingle with people you haven't really talked to before, and it's just this might sound kind of cringy, but I think it really, what we've talked about before is it really feels like almost magical. Like just being able to share a meal that you know came from a good place, is going to a good place, that is nourishing your body, while being able to talk to people from your community is such just a human thing, I feel like. But at the same time, I think it's something that has kind of been lost in ways in our society. Oftentimes, a meal can just be something that's on the go, or something that you kind of forget is meant to be shared. And some people, sometimes you don't get the privilege to sit down and share a meal. But I think what we're trying to do is provide a space for that community. I think a lot of times you need to like have a nice reservation or be willing to pay a lot of money to sit down and have a nice meal with people. But we don't believe that always needs to be the case. But getting back to your question about like challenges and rewards in our like what's rewarding in our organization, I think challenges is definitely like we are volunteer based, so sometimes we don't get as much volunteering, or sometimes final season is coming up and people need to put their time elsewhere, so it can kind of be left to like at the end of the day the work needs to be done, so sometimes it can be hard to get it all done at a certain times. But also more broadly about just our organization, COVID, we took a pretty hard hit during COVID, just based on loss of knowledge about the organization. A lot of it is just kind of training in the next the next leaders, but that kind of got lost during COVID. So right now we're really thinking about how can we reach the people that need us and that we want to be interacting with, and how can we kind of have the biggest impact that we want to have in our community, and how can we show up in a way in our community that is really fulfilling our mission. Um, and then also a huge thing recently is keeping meals affordable. While we can we have to pay rent, we have to pay for our ingredients. So with I did a little research, and food costs have risen 30% since 2020. And obviously that's just hard to keep up with, like we have to sometimes make decisions based on price, which we obviously want to put all of our money towards the best places we can, but it's just it's a hard balance sometimes to figure out how we can best price our meals. But in terms of rewards, I'll always say, like, I give a lot of my time to slow food every week, but I don't think I could ever give back to slow food what it has given me. It's given me really a sense of understanding how important like food is to our community, and how rewarding it can be to just cook for people and talk to people that you haven't met before, or that you wouldn't have met otherwise. Like, actually, I met this lady. She used to be an advisor at the school, and now she's retired, but she's been coming to Slow Food since it started back in 2007. So sometimes I get to sit with her and talk to her about what it was like, or just connect on random things. And we actually went to brunch yesterday just outside of Slow Food just to hang out. So it's just fun, like those relationships you wouldn't have made or met otherwise. But other than that, it's really fun. People are so creative too in Slow Food, just with the different cuisines. Every week I'm trying something I haven't tried before, and it's just fun to give back to a community that deserves it, and people that it's just fun to connect with people that I wouldn't have otherwise before. So
Wow, that is beautiful. Like I just have chills all over my arm. I'm just so touched and so moved by everything that you've described. And without having ever visited or seen a slow food organization operating myself, I can just see such a vivid picture that you've described of this magical place, like you
hmm
mentioned, where people are coming together. I know you mentioned there's, a focus and a priority to incorporate different cultural dishes and things to bring in folks from all different communities. And I really just think that is such a special thing, and truly just as important as food access itself, because the
totally.
work I do, I don't know if I mentioned,
hmm
I run a campus food pantry in DC.
hmm
And for many people in higher ed, and elsewhere, food access and just making sure people have access to food is one
hmm
part of the issue. But I really love how you talk about the social dimensions of food as well, and how it can also bring people together, and how it can create this shared understanding and this shared connection that I think transcends, just meeting your basic
Totally.
needs of food. And so I find so much inspiration in the fact that you all are doing this and have been doing this for so many years, and I'm just now learning about this. I'm like, that's crazy. Um, but my last question for you is, looking ahead, I know you're, almost probably done with your time in college, right? So looking ahead, you said you hope to work in sustainability and agriculture. How has your time with Slow Food UW shaped those future goals? And what kind of work do you imagine yourself doing after graduation?
Totally. Yeah, I think zooming out like a lot, the biggest thing slow food has one of the biggest things slow food has taught me is just how do you look at an issue, how do you look at a problem and actually have an impact, or like an impact that you want to have. And kind of what I mean by that is I think slow food has done a really good job of, you see an issue, and a lot of times you think about a lot of times you can advocate for like what a solution could look like, or talking about what can be done in the future. But I think what slow food has really taught me is like even if we don't have all the resources to fix, the food system, we can try and we can emulate a system that works well, and to actually be able to work in part of the solution is really interesting just to see people's reactions to it, to see how much support people are willing to give to just a better, more just food system. But more broadly, just about how, in order to get things solved, even in the larger climate crisis, you got to just start somewhere, even if it's small, even if it's two meals a week. I think what we need now is action, and what we need now is for people to show up and do the work that needs to be done. So I think that has taught me just to kind of like jump in instead of, not everything has to be perfect. It's not going to work first try, but you can just start. And it's honestly really amazing and inspiring to see the amount of support and how people really care. But you just got to give them a place to start. So I think in the future, I'm going to be looking. I'd like to work in sustainability, would love to work in relation to the food system, but I'll just be looking at, where's the work being done and where can I best put my skills and expertise to help that. I'm hoping I would love to work in the food system in some way. I'd love to be a better cook. Like I try new recipes and maybe go to some sort of culinary school, but eventually would just love to work in sustainability and food system. Who knows where that'll be? Maybe a nonprofit, maybe a business. I don't know, but I think Slow Food has really given me an understanding of how do you start the action? How do you connect with people? Because I think that's what's most important starting out. But yeah, I think I graduate next semester, so then we'll see where I am a year from now. But I'm just really grateful for what Slow Food has taught me.
That's amazing. And I know that this work is timelier than ever and more urgent than ever. And, I would bet that there are going to be a lot of organizations in sectors that are willing to have you, because I can just see from our conversation the passion and the knowledge that you have about this. And I find it really inspiring for the work that students are doing on their campus. So I just want to thank you again for joining me and sharing the work that you're doing with Slow Food. Your leadership and vision for a more sustainable food system is just truly inspiring. And I'm just grateful that you took the time to be a part of this conversation today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's cool that you're highlighting organizations. It's fun to be heard and seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up this week's episode of the Student Impact Report. So make sure to follow us on Instagram at SPNC_USA. And you can also catch our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. See you next time.